Okay, we're on.
Freddie Highmore, The Good Doctor really has become just this huge breakout hit. What do you think is the reason why this show has just struck such a chord with viewers?
I know, it's funny, isn't it? How it's funny because I'm here in Vancouver where we film, and it feels somewhat like this little bubble that we shoot in, making these small, not small in a demeaning way, but kind of intimate, personal stories. And we go into our little hospital rooms and make these. And then, as you say, it's like, oh, I guess people are watching elsewhere outside of our cozy bubble that we're working in. But I guess it's maybe the optimism of Shaun. That's certainly what I like about him, his hopeful outlook on the world, the fact that he's always trying to see the good in people. He's not immediately judgmental. I don't think he really recognizes or understands stereotypes. And I think in the world that we live today, when there's a lot of trouble that we hear about on a daily basis, the idea of someone who is just a good person, who has a wonderful heart and tries to do the right thing, I think is something people are drawn to.
And what was your experience with autism before being in this show, and how has playing Shaun Murphy maybe given you a new perspective or enhanced your perspective on autism?
Yeah, I mean, I knew people personally before the show came along who have autism and who are very close to people who do. But of course, as the phrase goes, when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And I think that's important to remember with respect to Shaun. It's constructing him as an individual. He can't represent, nor should we try and make him represent everyone on the spectrum in the same way a neurotypical lead character of a show couldn't possibly represent everyone who's neurotypical. So in terms of research, I guess, beyond those personal connections that I had, it was trading pieces of literature and documentaries back and forth with David Shaw, and then using his working on his scripts, really, that so beautifully set up Shaun from the very beginning. And we have a specialist on board too, who's there in kind of all aspects of production.
Well, and it's interesting. You mentioned David Shore, and I think I had read that you said that you read this script 3 days after finishing Bates Motel, and so was working with David Shore, a draw with this particular script, and what's been that experience like with the two of you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think his name is a draw and speaks for itself. But I think the reason that we clicked as we needed to so quickly 3 days after Bates was that we saw the show from the same perspective, and he's so focused on character, really, and on building those emotional arcs first, as opposed to the medical drama that obviously drives a lot of the plot, but it doesn't drive the emotional storylines from Shaun's point of view throughout much of the season. There are broader themes of how he's adjusting to this new world that we see him in, this big city life that he's never experienced before, or how he's going to fall in love, or the idea of him trying to assert some form of independence as time goes by, but not truly understanding necessarily how that can manifest itself for him. And yet David and I guess we often look at each other and think, or forget that despite the hospital environment and the medical storylines, that we're working on a medical show. It doesn't always feel like that. And then you're reminded with certain lines that you've got to twist your mouth around, that there is some medical jargon to deal with, but it never feels like the driving force of the show in a funny way.
Bates Motel was sort of your first sort of big lead in an American TV series. What's it like starting another one after it's sort of like starting The Good Doctor after you've had Bates Motel sort of under your belt?
I guess there's there's a level of confidence that you get in, as with all professions or things that you get to do, when you've done something for a certain period of time, it gives you more confidence to go and do something else, and you've learned something. And I think the idea with Shaun is that because he's a very specific character, you couldn't really shy away or hide in the background or not make decisions. And that was exciting and perhaps daunting at the same time, that but yes, they sort of gives you a confidence, I guess, to go and to choose something and actively go for a specific portrayal of a character.
And along those lines, one of the things I think is so fascinating about Shaun is that he's not made flawless. He has flaws and struggles. Was that really important, that he not be, quote unquote, just good to the point of being perfect?
Yes, and I think it's particularly important that we give them flaws, because I think the stereotype that's often put out there of someone with autism is, first of all, that they're somehow emotionless or devoid of emotion and don't experience as broad a range of emotions as neurotypical people do, but also with, along the lines of the savant syndrome side to Shaun, that, as you say, that he's somehow machine-like or knows everything and will never get anything wrong and is some kind of superhero, which we never wanted Shaun to be. So yes, and I think those flaws hopefully make him endearing too. But it's fun when you find out that his medical prowess, if you like, is his greatest strength and at times his greatest weakness. He can be so focused on something to the point of not seeing another solution or another problem, and gets wholly invested in something that in ways that can be detrimental.
And I do think like one of the themes the show touches on is this idea of mistakes, and how Shaun makes mistakes, but so does everyone. Although sometimes with Shaun, it's very easy for people to blame the autism when he makes the mistake, and sort of it takes away his credibility of being a doctor, where other people, their mistakes are more easily excused. How do you sort of strike the balance with sort of making Shaun different than everyone else, but also touching on the sort of universality of Shaun?
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think what's interesting so far, until the sort of we've just finished the episode that will be the kind of mid-season finale, if that's the right phrase. The 10th episode overall, which is one of my favorites, and everything kind of comes to a head. I guess it's a journey somewhat of self-discovery for Shaun, in understanding where his weaknesses may lie. I think in many ways he's probably sailed through a lot of the more technical or exam related material in his younger years, and despite difficulties with social interaction, for example, they haven't quite been put to the test as much as a practical hospital environment requires. And yes, and as we'll see in this sort of last big episode too, it's him finding some form of independence and working out the person and the doctor that he wants to be, and what he sees as important, his priorities, and those things that maybe aren't as important to him, or he doesn't see as being relevant, which may be shocking to others, but from Shaun's perspective is completely logical.
And we've started to see in recent episodes some of that, including the episode that just aired last night, Apple, which was directed by your former co-star Nestor Carbonell.
Yes.
First of all, what was it like working with him as a director, and just having that kind of Bates reunion?
It was wonderful. It was great. Yeah, he directed 3 episodes on Bates Motel, and then sort of sitting down before this season, I said, well, he would be brilliant to come in and direct an episode of this. So we had a great time, and also because we're in Vancouver, I've managed to kind of convince a lot of the same people who worked on Bates Motel to come and work on this show. So with Nestor around, as well as, you know, the DP that we have and the camera guys and the gaffer, it certainly felt like the family was reunited. He called me Norman a couple of times too, which was always good. It's like when Norman does, I mean, Sean, sorry. Our rivalry has been put to bed though. We could finally work together as partners as opposed to enemies after all those years.
Have you directed an episode of Bates yourself, Freddie? Are you keen to direct some Good Doctor?
I'd love to, yeah. I mean, the first season, I guess, because of the requirements of the character and having never done 18 episodes of something before, I kind of wanted to just focus on that. But absolutely, I'd love to direct and write further down the line.
Cool.
That's some of the most interesting, and to me the most dramatically interesting scenes on the show take place between you and Richard Schiff. Can you talk about what's that relationship been like working with him?
He's great. We have he has such a dry, wry sense of humor that I think the British humor side of me identifies with and gets along with very well. And he brings so much to the scenes. He brings so much to the character, and it's been really fun. There's a sort of big climactic scene that we've got together in this last mid-season one that resets in some ways what that relationship is about between Shaun and Glassman. But Rich is great and alive and in the moment, and always looking for new ways to play a scene, and it never feels, even though we have so many scenes together, just the two of us, they never feel repetitive because of what he continues to search for in new ways of solutions, if you like.
Yeah, no, Richard's fantastic. What do you think, Freddie, what's been the most challenging thing for you in playing Shaun?
The most challenging, I think, I mean, not to not answer your question by shifting it onto others, but I will give you an answer too. Shaun is very internal. A lot of what Shaun is thinking isn't necessarily obvious to those who he's interacting with. And so I guess I was going to say it's sometimes I feel it's an adjustment for everyone when there's a scene that Shaun's a big part of, that other actors aren't necessarily getting what they may expect from another scene partner. And it's all of us as a group, as opposed to me just purely as an individual, who find those new ways of creating a scene and constructing it with a central character that is different from something we've experienced before, and that changes the whole group dynamic. So I hope that they feel like they're getting something from me, even if Shaun is very much in his in his head. Not that I'm not thinking those feelings or there emotionally, but it's different, and it must be odd for others to react to.
Well, and along those lines, it seems like so much of Shaun has that very specific cadence to his voice, and when you combine that with the eyes and then you add the medical jargon, how do you prepare all of that? It seems like, do you just tackle it? Do you learn the lines using Shaun's voice in your head, or does that come later? Does the voice come later?
It's funny, the voice was something that, I mean, obviously through, a combination of research, but also just reading the script from the very beginning, the cadences seemed to be there in the way that David was writing it, or the logical way in which Shaun seems to think and therefore speak. And I try and stay sort of odd now, speaking in my British normal accent, because I try and stay in the, if not Shaun's specific voice, at least the American accent as much as possible, so that it becomes somewhat second nature. But you're right. It's a different way of speaking, and it's always ultimately tying it up with the emotion that's going on underneath. I mean, I think that's the way that I always try and approach characters in general. Is there are the external manifestations of whatever Shaun is going through at the time, in the specific way in which he may hold his hands or speak. But the most important thing is kind of getting in tune with what he's thinking, with what's going on inside.
Can you think of a scene or a moment from the show where you've had to tap into an emotion or a particular express something of Shaun's that's been a bit difficult because it's more stuff that's going on in his head rather than stuff that is happening outside?
I think one of the really interesting episodes was Shaun when he meets a patient who also has autism, and seeing how Shaun deals with that. And I think our expectation as an audience would probably be along the lines of Shaun would, have an immediate connection and an immediate bond with this person. But I think what was interesting is that he didn't recognize himself. It was until the very end, of course, when the arc of the episode, but it was fighting against perhaps those usual instincts and thinking, no, from Shaun's point of view, he's looking at this person and thinks, I'm nothing like them. I don't see myself in them at all. And whether that's some form of self-denial from Shaun's point of view, or whether he just genuinely doesn't see it, is the sort of interesting dynamic at the beginning of the episode. And I think those big moments of emotional connection on the show are often underplayed in the traditional sense, because, like the moment where he says, "You're like me," and has that big epiphany, I guess, of seeing himself and finding that connection finally. But those moments aren't melodramatic; they're not over the top, and nor should they be. So that's what's interesting too, when you see this big scene at the end that has to feel meaningful. At the same time, it has to stay true to Shaun's specific character.
And it seems like that theme. We also saw that at the end of last night's episode, where he has that lovely scene with Leah, who, and he just says, "I made a mistake and someone got hurt," and she hugs him.
Yes.
And is that relationship between you and her is really, really fascinating. What can we expect from that dynamic?
There's much more of that. Paige is brilliant, and I love those scenes together. But yes, as you say, it's the perfect example of where the entire episode really rests from Shaun's point of view in terms of the culmination of his arc and journey in that final little scene that's all about a hug. And so for me, it feels like that's what's fun about the show, those subtleties, those small little beats and little moments on which a lot of stuff seems to hang, but that doesn't necessarily need to be kind of shoved down your face, down your throat, whatever the phrase is. But yeah, no, there's a lot more to come with Shaun and Leah, and he, I think we'll just continue to see how he falls for her, really, and how she brings out a different side to him than we may have seen otherwise. And I think at the moment, Shaun has been his most relaxed and his most easygoing at the hospital. He feels comfortable in that medical dynamic, but I think there'll be a point at which he feels similarly as comfortable with Leah.
What do you think? What do you think is the biggest thing Shaun has learnt over the course of the season so far, and what's the biggest thing you've learnt from from your working on the show and playing him?
I mean, for me, one of the things and I've just finished this book called Neurotribes, which kind of delineates the history of, it's a pretty big book, so I've been reading it for a while, the kind of history of autism and how perceptions of that have changed over time. And that was fascinating to me as a learning experience. And I guess from Shaun, you, in some ways you realize, as with all characters, you realize your own limitations, or the idea that he pushes himself beyond a point that is that is necessarily healthy. And sometimes within this all-consuming world of making a television show, you have, or I have, a similar tendency to want to throw myself into absolutely everything. And what was the first part of your question? I'm sorry, I got distracted by your West Wing thing on the side and was thinking, oh, Richard Schiff is there.
Yeah, yes.
Oh boy.
And how has Shaun changed?
Yeah. How's Shaun changed? Or what's he learnt?
I think he's learned, I mean, on a basic level, I think he's learnt how better to go about easy social conversation, and learn to kind of the bed manner of being a doctor to some extent. He's gone on that journey. And at the same time, I think the real question now, as we get to the end of this part of the season, is that of independence and of him realizing who he is, what he wants to be, and the friction between him and Glassman, who obviously wants to only to protect Shaun and kind of has Shaun's best interests at heart. But from Shaun's perspective, he doesn't see it that way. And so I think there'll be, as the tension between the two of them is building, I guess, over time.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Richard Schiff moment from The West Wing, Freddie?
I knew this was coming.
I put myself in it, haven't I, by mentioning The West Wing.
Yeah.
I'm still to see the whole of The West Wing, but I've promised Richard that I will catch up as soon as possible.
Well, that's fine. It took him ages to finally watch the show because he doesn't like to watch himself.
Yeah, so maybe he's seen none of The Good Doctor, and he won't have seen any of this, so he won't know that I didn't have a favourite Richard Schiff West Wing moment.
Do you have a favourite Richard Schiff Good Doctor moment?
I do. I like the scene at the end of, I think it was a couple of episodes ago, when the two of them are watching television together in the store. I think he makes me laugh. He kind of cracks me up by doing so little. It's that sort of dryness, and no, he's fascinating. There's always so much going on, but I like the two of them, chilling in the store, hoping that they can go to the Super Bowl one day.
or even just not have to watch it on the TVs in the store.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Good.
Well, Freddie Highmore, thank you so much for talking with us, and congratulations on The Good Doctor. And we look forward to talking with you again soon.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All the best for the Golden Globes, Freddie, as well.
Well, you never know. It's yes. Thank you. No, it's lovely that people are recognizing the show and enjoying what we're doing. And I guess, as I said at the beginning, to bring us full circle, it's funny doing these conversations because you feel like I'm just in this little world in Vancouver. So it's back to the American accent now and onwards.
Yeah. No, fantastic. No, lovely to chat.
Cheers.